Okay, so this is a book review on the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership by Jim Dethmer et al. There's a couple of other authors in there that come after his name. I'm labeling this book a must read. I'm just going to give you that rating right up front. And then as we go through, I'll tell you some of the reasons why. And then I have a brief introduction of myself. This book club is currently with the Geek Group members in the Geek Group Plus or above subscription. I am a real estate investor and educator with a background in engineering and business. If you want to find out more about the Geek Group, then find us at multifamilygeeks.com. And I was going to do what does the book look like, and I will post a copy of this too.
Integrity means wholeness. The word integrity should.
Will you guys go ahead and hit mute? And before you do, can you actually see that, or is it not focusing on the title?
It's not focusing on the title.
All right. I'll post a copy of the cover so you can see what it looks like. And then, yeah, see if you guys can both hit mute, and that might reduce some background sound. Yes, awesome. Thank you, guys. That does help. Okay, so let's go through who the authors are. That's not appropriate here. Let's go to a quick review of the table of contents. So I'm just going to read it to you since it's too hard to see. So first, the author, Dethmer, talks about two lives. One is above the line, one is not. And that's his basic description of above the line and not being a binary decision. And I'll talk to you about that in a minute. But beyond that, it talks about all the 15 commitments. Here's what they are. Taking responsibility. Number 2, learning through curiosity. Number 3, feeling all feelings. Number 4, speaking candidly. Number 5, eliminating gossip. Number 6, practicing integrity. Number 7, generating appreciation. Number 8, excelling in your zone of genius. Number 9, living a life of play and rest. Number 10, exploring the opposite. Number 11, sourcing approval, control, and security. Number 12, having enough of everything. Number 13, experiencing the world as an ally. Number 14, creating win for all solutions. Number 15, being the resolution. And then he talks about what it is to change or to move through these different commitments at the end of all this. All right. So there's sort of a summary of the table of contents. Then he opens the whole book around this the idea of current leadership. So he meets with CEOs and highly successful humans all around the world. And he's talking about a certain group of them. Their successes are resulting in a lot of failures in other parts of their life. He points to things like broken marriages, fractured families, hardened hearts, and dreamless futures, painting potentially a very bleak reality for certain individuals who are hard-pressing and highly successful in our society individuals. Then he goes in the concept of leading from above the line. The above the line or below the line, as I just mentioned, is really an illustration on the two choices of conscious versus unconscious leadership. And he goes through sort of the background of, we've all read a lot of books on leadership. So he's like, why another book on leadership? And on this one, he's going to present these two opposite sides of the coin. And the failures that I'm previously reading of current leadership would be the type of things that result from unconscious leadership in his presentation. It's the conscious leadership that he's arguing is the real type of leadership that leads to not just the development of the leader, but the development of all the people in the organization that are following the leader, so to speak. So he calls it a binary decision. A binary to me means like computer programming, it's 0, it's 1. It's above the line, it's below the line. Once you decide on a conscious leadership perspective, there is no other choice. You go that route all the way. And so he points out that once committed to conscious leadership, we may make mistakes, but we always return to the path, as that is the very definition of conscious leadership. So In other words, it's that fundamental decision of on or off that then sets us down the path of one or the other. And conscious leadership, by its very nature, is a growth mindset, is a growing perspective. So we can expect to have deficiencies, failures, and I guess growth experiences type thing in as we go through that process. So he starts to talk about what is conscious leadership. So before he gets right into what is conscious leadership, and that's basically what the 15 commitments address, what is conscious leadership, he talks about the results. So rather than the opposites that he brings up in the beginning of the book, of the broken marriages, fractured families, hardened hearts, dreamless futures, he's going to contrast that with creativity, full human creativity, collaboration, higher retention of employees. Talks a lot about that, given our current conditions of being able to keep the best employees in an organization is a very high priority. Human happiness. And then he argues that happy humans are healthier. And the whole concept of employee engagement. And those are just a few of the benefits that he mentions. So then I'm going to roll into commitment 1. And I really only made a few bullets on each of these because he spends time just defining what the commitments are and then proceeds to provide multiple stories, company examples of what it looks like to live in these different commitments. So commitment 1 is taking radical responsibility. And he gives the positive, the pro, and then he gives the con. So the pro is somebody who is taking radical responsibilities is committing to taking full responsibility for their life, their social and emotional well-being. Unconscious leadership is the exact opposite of that. So basically he describes it as judge and blame, right? Something is now happening to me, something is being put upon me, and therefore that's why things are a judge and blame kind of situation, rather than I'm responsible, I'm going to do whatever it takes, and I'm going to keep moving forward no matter what, the two sort of sides of a coin. And on that note, it's kind of this idea of an anti-value, right? So values are things that we believe and therefore try to practice that make us and those around us better. The opposite of those things would be an anti-value, right? It's something that we do that results in just the opposite, right? And this is his example, and he does this all the way through. He talks about what it is to be the commitment, the positive, and what it is to be the anti or the opposite of the positive. So the anti-value in this case being judge and blame. So I think from this first, and the way this flows in this book, the way Dethmer describes it is this first commitment becomes your number one goal. And kind of to the point where if you don't have this first commitment mastered or you haven't moved beyond it, you can kind of stop the book here and spend all your time reorganizing your life around commitment 1. And just to show what that means, right, you probably might already be thinking it. To commitment 2 here, learn through curiosity, right? So I commit to getting curious, not furious, and commit to asking more questions to understand what is really happening. So the idea of curiosity is, it's very human of us to hear things, see things, and perceive them through our filters. As we perceive them this way, we come to conclusions about what they mean, what that person meant, what that person is trying to do, etc. And in the vast amount of all cases, often we are not correct in those original assumptions. And it takes quite some time to get to the bottom of what's really happening, what another person is saying, what another person is trying to do, what their motives are, all along these lines of curiosity being a mindset. And the opposite of that being an assumption that we know what's really happening, when in the reality is we rarely do. So the process of exploration is what really generates true human creativity. The idea that we're curious opens up not just creativity for ourselves, but anybody else involved in the situation. Even if they're involved in living it and we're involved in just observing it, the curiosity component starts to generate that creativity from all parties involved. Then this says, note that this commitment is not possible in a judge and blame organization. In other words, the commitments need to be mastered in order. So back to what I was pointing out before, you can read this book and you can get to commitment 1. And if it's a major stumbling point for us, then I can spend my time on commitment 1 and not move to commitment 2. Because commitment 2 is relying on the benefits of commitment 1 for it to work, right? This idea that we have to be willing to take a responsibility for our own actions and for our own results in our life before we can get curious, right? Curiosity will take on a judge and blame perspective if judge and blame remains our value from commitment 1. Okay, so take that with a grain of salt. There's a lot of commitments in the book. The 15 different commitments is quite a few. And even when we get to the end here, I don't even cover them all. I just start to summarize the remaining number of values just from the commitments, from the standpoint that a lot of us, me, I'll put myself at the top of this list. I still may be working on 1, 2, or 3, right? So I don't know that I need all the others yet. And so I don't need to explore them too deeply. But with that said, let's get to commitment number 3, feeling all feelings. So I commit to feeling my feelings all the way through. Anti-value is feeling suppression and denial. Note the need for a 3-part I statement found in another book that I've read. So this whole issue of feelings is big for me, as I grew up in a family with a culture where we believed that feelings, or the expression of our feelings, or the acknowledgement that we even had feelings, was an admission of weakness. So in my family, I say culture, it was the culture of my family, and possibly even my, that family group going up through my parents' parents, and their parents' parents, right? This idea, and even sort of if you look at the part of the world my ancestors come from, this idea of not acknowledging feelings and considering them an admission of weakness is sort of a cultural issue. So if you've grown up in this kind of culture or this kind of family, this can be a real challenge for us to go back and go, okay, feelings are friendly, and I need to not only talk about them, but express them, and then to be in a group of people who are willing to not only hear them, but not adopt your feelings, right? I may feel a certain way. Another person on the team may say, tell me about it. It doesn't mean they have to adopt my feelings. They can be an outside observer. They can help me work through those feelings and acknowledge them. And that's part of the basis of the 3-part I statement, which Dethmer doesn't talk about specifically, but I feel like he's hinting at, and a very effective method of sharing feelings, which I got from a book. It's Parent Effectiveness Training by Thomas Gordon. But it's not, he didn't invent it. It's a counseling idea that when we share feelings, we say, number 1, what happened? You said this to me. How I felt. I felt hurt. And the result from that, I wasn't able to continue my work because it bothered me so much. If you think about the way that statement is made, it's a lot about what's going on in me as the feeling of feeling persons, and not the other person who is potentially doing something. They may or may not have even known that that was generating those feelings. Nonetheless, in this type of organization that's going through these commitments, the teams are responsible for understanding each other's feelings, acknowledging them, and working to just be more open about that. And this goes back to the idea of feelings and sharing feelings. There's another idea, we have another method called the Acer Method. Acer is A-I-S-R. Acer. See if I type it right here. A-I-S-R, Acer. It stood for acknowledge, identify, speak, and release. There you go. I'm thinking off the top of my head. All right. This is the Acer method of dealing with feelings. So the first is to acknowledge that all human beings and all, as far as we can tell, even life forms, right? Even elephants, right, have emotions and feel feelings, right? So that's the acknowledgement part. And that even in my family, we couldn't even get past that first step, was acknowledgement, right? Next is identify. What is the feeling? Is it hurt? Is it fear? Is it, and hurt and fear, I say those in sort of the bulk category. Hurt can be all kinds of things, like I was offended. Offended is a slighter word, hurt, but it's in the same category as my feelings were hurt, right? So that's identifying as best as we can what the actual feeling is within us, hurt. Speak. I felt hurt from that situation. Just speaking it allows you to go to the next step of release, right? And that's the theory of a lot of the therapy that all of us are potentially involved in and should be involved in, right? With each other, helping each other to go through that process of acknowledge, identify, speak, and release. So the Acer method, right? And I don't know how you get Acer, A-I-S-R, Acer. There you go, the Acer method. So that's all along the lines of feeling feelings. And he's correctly pointing out that the workplace is a very real place for people to still be human. And without the expression of those human feelings, it's possible that we're not being authentic with each other. Okay. With that said, on commitment 3, let's go to commitment 4, speaking candidly. So the commitment 4, the conscious leader is going to make the commitment. I commit to expressing what is true to me. And there's some interesting concepts in there. The idea of what is true and true to me, right? And then the next bullet, I commit to expressing my truth in a way that allows me to be wrong and learning from it. So part of, I think, this commitment of speaking candidly is the idea that while we experience truths in our own reality, this may or may not be a truth for anybody else anywhere near us, even right next to us, right? So the idea that, hey, this is truth to me right now, and then being ready and open to make adjustments with, oh, when I hear your perspective, or oh, when I hear where you're coming from, that it allows me to not only be, and I don't know that wrong is the right word there, I forget which word he used, but not only be open to adjusting my truth, but learning about sort of all the other alternatives to my truth, right? In my own head, I can become very limited in the way I see things. And it's through that discussion and team interaction that it opens up a whole new world for us to experience. And hence the benefit of teamwork and collaboration, right? That's the very basis of the power of collaboration. So the next one, commitment 5, eliminating gossip, right? And that's kind of on the lines of the prior one, speak candidly. But gossip is the idea that we talk about another person differently when they're not present than when they are present. And so he proposes a commitment to talk about other people who are not in the room as if they are in the room, and as if what was being recorded were to be played for the other person, we would be okay with it. So, the commitment, I commit to telling a person what I said about them when they weren't in the room, and not only use the exact words, but the exact emotion and maybe tonal qualities that we used when they weren't in the room, right? This idea of being as willing to express how we feel directly with other people, whether they're present or not, assuming they're present type thing. Okay, so eliminating gossip, always a big problem within organizations. And if you go back through the others, you see how these start to build, right? Taking responsibility for yourself, learning through curiosity, feeling all feelings, speaking candidly, eliminating gossip. They start to tighten up, the commitments do. In other words, that first commitment is so sort of general and open, and the next one gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. They sort of take this reducing funnel kind of idea to the point where they get tighter and tighter. Commitment 6, practicing integrity, I commit to being a better person in a continual manner, right? This idea of self-improvement, this idea of a growth mindset, and not just for the sake of others, but for the sake of ourselves, and the idea that we have to commit to being better for ourselves first so that it can benefit others. So with that one, number 6, I kind of stopped and I just said, let's run down through the others in a little bit more of a summary fashion. You can see how this starts to tighten up, and all of the commitments I think are very good. Commitment 7, generating appreciation. Commitment 8, excelling in your zone of genius. I think that's where he talks about this commitment to yourself to figure out who you really are, what you're great at, what you love to do, what you potentially get paid an enormous amount of money to do. And this is, you know, back to other authors, the unique ability by, I'll think of his name in a minute here, and other concepts of just really spending our life getting to know who we are. And when we exist in that truth, there's no other person on earth that can compete with us, because we are all so uniquely individual. So living a life of play and rest, exploring the opposite. That's back to the idea that if we all have a certain belief right here, let's just turn this on its head and look at it from the opposite perspective and see if we can gain some understanding for that. Sourcing approval, control, and security. Having enough of everything, this sort of faction understanding that I'm okay exactly where I am. Experiencing the world as an ally, even when we feel like those around us might be out to get us. If we can shift our perspective to saying, this person is potentially here to teach me something, and turn it around from that perspective, then the world becomes our ally. And it's not anybody out to get us. It's literally us going through a growth trajectory. Number 14, creating win for all solutions. And number 15, being the resolution. And I think what you get back to in a lot of these books, you know, I think of Wayne Dyer, where if you know, speaking generically about God, if that can possibly be done, if there is a God and we are created in their image, then at some point we are God, and therefore I think Wayne Dyer would literally say it's God praying to God, right? Family members and or allies, etc., right? So I think that's exactly where he's headed with that in the Commitment 15, which is a very deep sort of philosophical perspective as you go through it. So I wrote, just to finish up here, to try to bring it home. Interestingly, the commitments can be embodied in a company's core values. I think that's one of the benefits of our company. We've had the 5 core values, and they embody a lot of these very commitments sort of within them. So I think this can be gone about different ways with the commitments and still achieve the same result. And so this book is about living to your highest possible life and wanting to be around others who are trying to do the same. I definitely recommend it as a must read, and just that idea that we are trying to grow to our highest manifestation of what our life is at this moment, knowing that it's just a stair step on the way to achieving even more growth in the future. So there you go. That's my presentation of the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership by Jim Dethmer.
I got that for you.